what Rachel shared this morning, there are core elements. So within that core side of education and childcare, this is the section that covers 0 to 19. So if you were thinking from a tutor perspective, what am I going to be delivering in this core aspect? You will be delivering 12 core elements. They will be arranged in elements such as what you see here. And then I'm going to talk to you about the perspective of content and delivery with the schemes of work in mind. Please appreciate and acknowledge that this specification, as Susan alluded to, has not been signed off, but we don't anticipate any changes. So these 12 elements, if you were looking at those as a tutor and you were thinking of education and childcare, 0 to 19, looking at these subject areas or elements, there's nothing there really that jumps out and says, oh, this is completely new, this is completely different. So wider context, we're looking at the provision. So if you've been able to see a draft of the specification, you will note that wider context is looking at where might children and young people be, what types of provision. We also had a look within the schemes of work and the sample papers that Susan and Jill were showing us in terms of wider context, looking at grammar schools, independent schools, maintained, and so on. So the wider context gives an umbrella, an introduction to children and young people, education and childcare. We then have an element about supporting education. Again, that is going to be spanning that 0 to 19, so it is very much concerned with the early years foundation stage, the national curriculum, and post-compulsory educational offers. And it will give the wide spectrum. This is an introduction to what these things are. Safeguarding health and safety and well-being. Good to see that well-being is up there, but again, nothing that would faze us. Behaviour, parents, families and carers, working with others, child development, and again, just to stress, it's 0 to 19, observation and assessment, reflective practice, equality and diversity, special educational needs and disability, and English as an additional language. So there are 12 core elements. And in theory, you could be delivering those core elements within a discrete class of early years students. You may have students of that are from early years context and supporting teaching and learning, because those students will be receiving the same curriculum, the same syllabus and specification. Or you may have a discrete group of early years students and a discrete group of teaching assistants, assisting teaching students, which is probably more likely. The latter is probably more likely. And we're going to talk to you, I'm going to talk to you later about how you can perhaps look at elements of the core, which is introducing education and childcare in its grandest sense, and how you can actually bring on board and combine elements of occupational specialisms with that, so that that contextualization is beginning to make sense. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so if we imagine this then now from a student's perspective, we're coming along to college or school with our training providers, and we are studying those 12 core elements. There will be no internal assessment that is contributing to any grading. So we are almost studying 12 elements of syllabus, and then we are being exposed, if you like, to external assessment. Albeit tutors will want to be including formative, challenging opportunities. So you're going to be looking at elements, and then you're going to be thinking about, check and challenge your learning to make sure your students are retaining that information, that all the time you are preparing for synoptic external assessment. So if you think, wow, what size of an exam would it be if there are 12 elements, all of which that are broken down into much criteria? That's a heck of a lot to try and get into external assessment. And with that in mind, the examination, the external assessment, is split into two papers, paper A and paper B. And Rachel spoke briefly about that this morning. So paper A is going to be looking at some of those elements, and those will be stipulated, and paper B will look at the remaining, and it's looking like a fair divide. So they will be split. If you remember, just recapping from this morning, Rachel talked about how they would be. So you will have different types of questioning, and we'll go through that a little bit in a little bit more detail as well. And they will be graded from A star to E. So you are going to be able to see those students that you are teaching now. If you're worried that this is not going to be manageable or accessible, please be reassured that those grade spans from A star to E, in line with general education and A levels, will allow students of varying ability to be challenged appropriately through these examination papers. And we will make sure that there is a diverse variety of questioning styles within the paper to allow people to achieve at their full potential. So paper A, 2 hours. Paper B, 2 hours. This is going to be synoptic, so therefore it will be towards the end of the teaching of the core. There is no stipulation that at the end of year one, students must undertake that external assessment. However, be mindful of synoptic, be mindful of the fact that in the occupational specialisms, there are also further external assessments, and therefore, the delivery mode for external assessments is to be managed carefully and sensitively at your discretion and with your student needs in mind, of course. So paper A, paper B, the students do that towards the end of the year. Let's say that's the first opportunity because of the synoptic element. They will also undertake an employer set project. The employer set project has got 12 hours of controlled supervision. And that's because you are going to be, or your students will be going to be working towards a scenario that's a real life situation. So they'll be able to apply the knowledge that they have developed in the core, and they will be able to apply it into a real life situation. We'll talk about it a little bit more. You're making up your 100% here from paper A 35, paper B 35, and your employer set project 70%. Thank you, Rachel. So just to actually summarize there, you are going to be having an overall grade of A star to E for the core element of the T-level qualification. So that T-level for education and childcare is composed of 12 elements. Nothing jumps out as extraordinary there. The only thing to consider is it's 0 to 19, because this core subject area will be applicable whether you are interested in early years work, whether you're interested in teaching assisting, or whether you're interested indeed in moving down the line in mentoring in further or higher education. Once you've done that core and you've studied for that core and the teaching and delivery has happened, your students will be subject to external assessment. Paper A and paper B being 2 hours discrete in length, so a written exam of 4 when you put the two together, and they will be open for entry towards the end of that first year because of that synoptic element, but you as tutors will have the discretion as to when you feel they are ready. And the employer set project, which is 12 hours, will look at applying that knowledge to real life situations. Thank you, Rachel. So there's a bit of a Gantt chart here that shows a timeline for delivery and assessment. And if we look at where the deep red line there, let's focus on that section. So we can see that from September 20, when this first pilot is underway, up until the end of the 2-year program there in April 2022, the core content delivery and the core assessment entry cutoff for your examinations, you can see how that's going to work. And there are some separate sort of blocked out periods there for the exam. Thinking synoptic, thinking of the employer set project, and when results are going to be issued. And there you will see in line with A-level results, August 2021 for that first batch. Industry placement is blocked on the Gantt chart there all the way across. And that is very significant for those learners, those students who are working towards an early years pathway. Because the early years occupational specialism, and we will talk about occupational specialisms more in the next session, but that particular specialism does need to capture the early years educator criteria. And with that in mind, the industry hours or placement hours are significantly larger than assisting teaching, and are in fact sort of 750, I think, at this moment in time. And I'm saying it with the caveat of not yet signed off, because it may get tweaked slightly, but the increase is significant for that reason. The occupational specialisms, again, synoptic. So occupational specialism will have 3 assignments that are linked very much to practical application, because by now, after we've done that general core of teaching, our students are now deciding, if they haven't already, which pathway they are going to follow. And this can be also very much led by which pathways you are offering. You may offer early years only T-level, assisting teaching only T-level, and so on. Okay, thank you, Rachel. Okay, so 2 question papers, 2 hours per paper. It will be a set date and time, so like other invigilated examinations, and it can be resit, but there must be a resit of both papers. And the reason for that is that they are fully compensatory. Within those question papers, there will be an allocation of different assessment objectives to ensure that question papers are accessible to the range of students and their development and ability levels. For example, you will have some questions that are simply multiple choice in their characteristics. Some short answer questions that are expecting, a little bit of description maybe, or a little bit of an explanation. And then there'll be some extended responses that will build on that and may allow for some analysis and evaluation to be shown, and some theoretical grounding to be included. Again, this is something that's new. The assessment is externally set by NCF ECASH and externally marked, fully compensatory, to allow your students to maximize the achievement that they gain. Thank you, Rachel.
I'm just going to come in here because it's a feedback point, and one of the about the barriers that impacts that might impact student preparedness. So I'm going to deploy a question that should hopefully allow you to enter a free form answer to brainstorm. Appearing on the screens. I'm just going to leave it for a few minutes there, just to give everybody the chance to have a little think about that based on your own experience, and also everything that Janet was just reviewing for us about how the external assessments are arranged, what to expect from them, and all of that in view of the intentions of the core content itself, and give you a chance to type in any of your suggestions about what you think might impact your students' preparedness for these exams, and any ideas you might have about the kinds of issues you need to address, or even things that you'd like to see in terms of CPD to help that happen. In the chat box there. Feel free to add also, Janet, I don't have you muted at the moment, so anything you want to add to that, of course. I'll leave it one more minute there because I can see about 20% have submitted. So I'll just give you a second to get that typed in there. Thank you everyone for your feedback. Sorry for the long wait. I'm going to close this and we'll be able to review what everyone has said about the issues that have come up. And of course, this isn't sharing the answers with me, which is fantastic. What I should have done is just got people to put it in the chat box, which worked very well earlier. The answers aren't displaying for me. So if anyone has anything that they'd be willing to share in the chat box, that would be really helpful so that everyone can see the replies, because I won't be able to share them. I don't have access to those. We're experiencing a bit of technical difficulty at the moment. So Janet is off the line, but very this opportunity to ask you to give your feedback in the chat box if that's all right, because it would be really good to have that interaction between everybody who's attending, as well as just hearing from us, because part of the purpose of this session is for us to get your feedback, but also just to swap tips and ideas from the community of practice and hear from your experiences well. So it would be a shame to miss out on that just because I couldn't get it to display. So I'll leave that for a few more moments just so that you can see on the screen the question for feedback. And then we'll go through that together. I'm glad to see that Janet King is back. Hi, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've
Thank you,
had some
Rachel.
problems
Can
here
you hear
too with
me
the
okay?
test. Yes, I can hear you fine. I think
Okay.
there's a lag, so I'll mute myself in a moment. I'm just asking people to share their feedback in the chat box because we had a problem with the answers to the interactive question. So it's worth, if you want to have a look at the chat box, people are making suggestions there, and I'll hand over to you.
That's lovely. Thank you. I'm going to look at these, so bear with me while I scroll down. Okay, so having students on placement from the beginning will help apply theory and learning when responding to questions in the examination. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. I think there's a lot of teaching and learning to get through in the core, which is why when we look at the schemes of work and see how they've been sort of compiled and arranged for delivery within that academic year, you will see that, you know, there's good opportunities to be able to do that and send your students to placement. At the end of the day, let's face it, students aren't going to be any different than they are now in education and childcare, and the placement experiences that they have are absolutely fundamental to their understanding. We know that, we appreciate and acknowledge that. You certainly know that, and how they grow and develop. You know, they're completely different people sometimes in college and schools than they are when they blossom in their placement opportunities. So absolutely agree. Sorry, excuse me.
Just to share as well, because a couple of the replies have come through as a private just to the organizer, so they might not be visible to everyone, but some of them make really good points. So I'd like to share this one that's come through, which is that not all students will be ready for the assessment at the same point. More able students might be ready in the summer of year one, whereas others might not be ready until the autumn of year two. And this might cause problems with the planning and delivery schedule, especially for centres with small group sizes. So issues around sequencing of student preparedness, as well as the content there.
Yes, it is a good point. Absolutely good point. And, you know, that's why there is going to be some discretion for yourselves as tutors to think, you know, what works best for our students and for different cohorts of students, because they're different from one year to the next. So absolutely, and it won't come without its challenges. We know that, and it's about making sure that we have everything prepared for you, for schools and colleges and training providers to be able to offer that flexibility and make sure students are as absolutely prepared as they can be for their external assessment. But yep, absolutely agree, not without its challenges.
And we've got one suggestion here of a way of formatively assessing the students. Dylan Williams's 5 strategies for formative assessment as a good model for that. So thank you. And these are the kinds of things that curriculum can also support with in the future. And also anxiety as an issue around for the learners.
No, absolutely. And I think when it comes to that sort of check and challenge and formative assessment and approaches to that, I think it will be naturally occurring within the classroom, and it will also be something that I guess will take on a more serious role with the, you know, sort of that added intention of it being tested through an external element. Absolutely.
Okay.
Do we have any more questions?
Yes, there's one more
Rachel?
question, which is that we said the exams have to go together, but does the employer set project have to be in the same year or series as the examinations? So, in other words, do both the exams and the assessment, the employer set project have to go together?
I see. So taking A and B in one series and then delaying, if you like, the employer set project, for example.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware at this moment in time, A and B are definitely something that count as one, but have just been divided because of the sheer size and breadth of what they need to cover, and the employer set project will have a degree of further flexibility in terms of being tied into a series. I would like the assessment team to confirm that, but that's how I believe it is meant to be.
And just while we're on the subject of the papers and the employer set project, I did notice that I had made an error on one of the slides there, and I just wanted to clarify before we continue. The employer set project accounts for 30%, not 70%. That was just an error on the slides, so my apologies for that, and I'll hand back over to you, Janet, and continue with the presentation.
Thank you. And you know, that shows you about my functional skills and my mathematics, because I never noticed. I just said they add up to 100. So there we go. Sorry, my apologies as well.
I did that in the
Okay.
first session. We're in extraordinary times at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Right, we'll put our maths on the shelf and move on. Thank you, Rachel. So at the moment, Rachel, I can see that we've got there paper A and paper B. And what we can see here, everybody, is how the elements have been arranged. I said earlier that there's going to be an aspect of those 12 elements that are tested in paper A and an aspect that's going to be tested in paper B. So in paper A, you've got the wider context, support and education, safeguarding health and safety, well-being, behaviour, parents, families and carers, and working with others. And in paper B, the remaining elements there shown on the right-hand side. Thank you. So if we take a closer look, let's think about paper B. You've got a bit of an aerial view there. You've got better eyes than me if you can make that out. But let's zoom in onto the next slide and have a look at one question in particular. And then I'm going to hand back to Rachel when we've just gone through this and explored this question a little bit, so you'll be able to give your own feedback and your own opinion here. So this is a typical question at the moment. So give 2 indicators that may suggest a young person has difficulty with receptive language, and give 1 strategy used to develop a young person's receptive language. So over to you, Rachel, for the poll. Okay, so you've got the poll there asking what you think about the rate, how you rate the level of challenge for that question. Is it too easy? Is it about right? Or do you think it's beyond the appropriate level?
The votes are coming in. I'll give it maybe 30 seconds and then share the results with you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close that and share it now. We've got 45% of the audience voting, and I'm seeing that I think a couple of people are having some problems with entering the response. There is some sort of technical problem with that. If you want to respond to the polls in the chat box, please feel free, because the important thing is that we share the information and get to see what everybody thinks. Yes, please use the chat if you can't respond to the interactive polls. I'll share those responses now. Hopefully they're appearing on your screen.
Yes, I can certainly see those.
Around level 3 there, yeah.
Well, that's quite reassuring. That's good. That's good.
The next
Obviously,
one.
you're just seeing one type. Yeah, one type of question there. So that was good to hear. Okay, so how would you rate the accessibility of this question in terms of wording? Is it ambiguous and so on?
I do think some countdown music would be ideal for these polls. It's a shame I didn't have that built in. I'm going to assume 45% is the number of people who can manage to enter an answer to these. So I'll close when that's been reached, and you should be able to see the results.
Again, that's great. So we have, you know, albeit, you know, a limited reach today, we are seeing that 100% are showing no concern. So that's grand. That's good to hear. Thank you. Thank you for participating in that. Really useful. So next question, is the allocation of marks appropriate for this question? You're going to want to see the question again in a minute. It was 3 marks, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, great, great. Again, that's good to hear. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at a different type of question. So here we have Aisha, who's struggling to settle into her nursery class. She often cries when she arrives in the morning and always asks to be the first to leave at the end of the day. Evaluate how attachment theories could be applied to practice to support Aisha to settle into nursery. You must evaluate more than one theory in your response. Your response should demonstrate how the attachment theories can be applied to practice to support Aisha settle into nursery, and a reasoned judgment about how to best support Aisha with reference to theory. And there are 12 marks here, plus 3 marks for the quality of written communication. So let's do the same again. You might just want to leave that on the screen for a little minute because it's quite a detailed question, Rachel, and you may want to just read that through yourselves for a moment.
I'm actually inclined to say that we should just use the chat box for this rather than try and refresh the pools, just to make sure that this ticks along all right. If that
Yes.
sounds good, I'll leave it to you to raise what you think about the difficulty level, the wording and accessibility, and the allocation of marks, and any other issues. Because I think as we get into the longer questions, and we look at combinations of mark allocations, people will have richer feedback to give. So please use the chat box.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That sounds like a good idea.
Just to share a few of the responses with you, Janet, in case that's not accessible on your screen. I know you're in a different view to me. We've got comments. Angela says a detailed level 3 question for higher grades, and Tracy adds appropriate for level 3, but more pitched towards higher ability students. No issues with language, and feel mark allocation is both fair and appropriate. And Carol agrees, saying that higher ability students will manage this.
Absolutely, and these are fair and just comments, and absolutely valid comments that are coming in, because I think, again, you're spanning, you know, from the E to the A star, and whilst people may be able to pick up part of the 12 marks, depending on how they contribute to that particular question, then those students that have got that higher ability to be able to bring that theory and practice together will obviously fare better in this type of question, but there will still be opportunities for students of all levels and abilities to be able to gain something, which again is fair and just, and how you would mark your internal assessments like you do at the moment. So that's great. Okay, Rachel, I don't know whether we want to move on.
I'm moving the slides. Are they appearing for you?
I have slide 13. I've still got the question.
Could I get some feedback from other viewers in the chat box, please, about what you're seeing on screen at the moment? It appears either there's a very large lag with the slide transitions or something's gone awry.
Oh, I now have the next slide. Let's check that the audience can also see the employer set project slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so from that student perspective, again, here we are. We've studied those 12 core elements. We've done a paper A and paper B, and now we're looking at an employer-set project. What's all this about? So this is something that broadly aligns with the specialisms. So if you imagine now that your students are, or could be, either early years students or teaching assistant students, or indeed moving forward FE or HE mentoring students, they are actually going to be studying the same contextualized core subjects, those 12 elements. When it comes to the employer set project, they are able to actually select a scenario or situation that allows them to contextualize the knowledge and understanding of what they've been studying within their area of specialism. And they may well, especially within the early years setting, and as people have said, combining placement experience, practice and theory, we know it is an absolute fundamental benefit for our students. So they may well choose the scenario that aligns best with their experience in placement and their future occupational specialism. So they will be able to choose a situation from an early years, real life typical situation that's written by NCFE CASH and with a group of employers. And that will be given, and there'll be 12 hours of supervised under supervised conditions to be able to work towards this project with set criteria. So those scenarios will be selected, so you can choose early years or assisting teaching or moving forward FE, HE mentoring, and then you'll be asked questions around that. Those questions will be based on the knowledge and understanding that's been gained through those 12 core elements of delivery, but they will now be applying those skills, almost problem-solving skills in terms of, okay, so I know all of that, so what? How would I use it in a real-life situation in either a nursery or a school or a college and so on? So you have 12 hours to complete under supervised conditions. There will be a window for completion, just like if you're doing sort of technical qualifications now, you'll be used to that controlled element, and there'll be the set of tasks which at the moment we are looking at case studies, scenario type based tasks within that, and they will very much form a sort of find out, present, discuss, review format. They will be looking at problem solving a real life situation based on the knowledge of those 12 elements basically. They will incorporate some English, maths and digital skills, core skills, and they will be part and parcel, but they'll be contextualized and hoping that no one will notice that they're in there, to be fair. Thank you, Rachel. So when we think about the employer set project and you think about these assessment objectives, what does that actually mean? And those are actual assessment objectives, just basically build, if you've never heard of those before or they're not familiar in how you work, that the assessment team really work with these to ensure that there is that scope between A star and E. So you're basically, there will be 10% of that learning will be about planning. And then there'll be the applying how. So the assessment objective 2, they're building from each other. Assessment 3 will be used to select relevant techniques. Assessment objective 4 is about incorporating those English, maths, digital and core skills. And then assessment objective 5 is about that ability to draw conclusions really. So you don't need to worry too much about that. Basically, in a nutshell, what this means is that the assessment team, when they have been building these assessments, have taken on board the significance of ensuring that all learners from A star to E, that wide umbrella, that arching umbrella of ability is catered for and is catered for in a fair and just way. A, to allow for progression and maximize opportunity, and B, to allow for success and achievement for those that are sort of benchmark and hitting what is absolutely necessary to achieve. So it is a fair process. Thank you, Rachel. Oof. Okay, so let's look at some sample employer set project papers concentrating on the early years. Okay, so shall we do the same again quickly and just, it's quite small. My eyes are adjusting to the different sizes of the slide. So you should, here's an example. You should review the following brief ahead of the employer set project. Tasks will be provided to you in supervised conditions. So they're getting this ahead of time, okay? And the nursery that you work for has been informed that one of the children within the setting is not making expected levels of progress. The child is 37 months old. As a result of these developmental concerns, the key person has been notified and will continue to monitor and support the child's development. You've been asked to work with that key person to support the child's specific needs, and you are requested to undertake research that will inform your practice to effectively support the child's holistic development. Consideration must be given to, and then you've got the range there. So developmental norms and strategies, that will be appropriate to support development, early years, the early years foundation stage and the selection of suitable resources, the role of observation, reflection, assessment and planning, partnership working with parents, practitioners and others, safe working practices and risk assessment, education theories, concepts and pedagogy. So you can see how those bullet points there are sort of scanning some of the scope of the core elements, and they are now being applied to a situation. So you can prepare yourself with as much information as you can to be able to answer the question. And then we have a context here. You're employed in a school, 22 children attending the school based in an inner city area which has a high rate of unemployment. You've been asked to work with a key person to support the specific developmental needs of George, one of the children attending the school. George is 37 months old. So when George joined the nursery, a brief on-entry assessment was carried out with the involvement of his parents. An extract of this assessment has been made available for you. This shows his current level of development across a range of areas. George's profile notes are also included with the assessment information, which outline background information gathered by his key person. You are required to analyse this information in order to plan how you will support and develop his communication. So then you have examples here of the sorts of questions that you will be then asked in relation to George. So we are basically looking at a scenario situation. Here is George. We're in the early years setting. We've been given some time to see and to plan, and now we're going into a supervised situation with our employer set project. Very much a case of bringing theory and practice together. That is the sole aim of the employer set project. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so we have here a sort of a reflective account, creating an activity plan that you could use to support George. And again, some questions here that show how those assessment objectives have been aligned. So assessment 1, remember, was about planning. Assessment 2 is about applying. Assessment objective 3 is about selecting that information, and so on. So I'm going to let you just simply read through these, I think, to get a grasp of how that problem-solving element is being incorporated in terms of, here's our scenario or situation, and these questions will allow us to be able to see how that shows theory and practice to a real-life situation.
I'm also just going to encourage everyone to give their feedback in the chat box. In the interest of time, we're not going to do any more polls because I can see we've got about 5 minutes left. So rather than deploy those, I will encourage people, just as you're reading through these questions, we've looked at task 1 and task 4. if anything comes up, please do put it in the chat box. We'll take that.
Thank you. I think that's sensible.
And
okay,
just as I say that, we're on Q&A. So if anyone has questions for Janet around anything to do with the core, please do get those in. We've got a few minutes to address those. And we also have other members, other colleagues with us as well, who might be available for the Q&A. If you
Rachel, it's Janet. Are any questions coming through to you as organizer?
There aren't. I have had a concern about the audio though, so if anyone didn't catch that, I was just saying to get your questions in the box. Janet is here to answer those for you. Anything to do with core content delivery and assessments. If you're a colleague and you're available for Q&A, just give me a little message and I'll unmute you for that. No questions so far though, Janet.
Okay, thank you. I think while people are thinking of those questions, this is a good opportunity for me just to say that the schemes of work that Susan and Jill were talking about in the earlier sessions have been developed to assist with the delivery of the core. So working through 12 elements, you know, you can imagine how broad and deep that syllabus is becoming and how large a specification it might be. And so the schemes of work have been developed into themes, and they've been arranged into 5 themes, and I hope you've been able to see how they may work for you. So that 2 of the themes out of the 5 will be looking all the way through. So that's expected delivery all the way through the academic year, 2 of those themes. So child development and curricula. And then you've got the 3 remaining themes to be introduced per term. So 2 that are core that run all the way through the academic year, through all of your terms, and then picking up 1 at term 1 and another at term 2 and another at term 3 to run alongside. Thank you, Angela.
We have one question coming in. Are you?
I was able to see a question about the employer set project. Would you like me to take that, Rachel?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so if we think about the employer set project, at this moment in time, the paper A and the paper B certainly have to be taken together as one, but split into 2 timed papers, a bit like an English paper that might have a part 1 and a part 2 to it, but it becomes 1 paper. The employer set project is separate to that, completely separate to that, and it's at your discretion when you take it. It will be taking the knowledge and understanding within the questions, though, from those 12 elements. So whilst it's at your discretion when you take it, and you'll know when your students are ready for that, then they will need to have had some synoptic teaching across all of those 12 elements to be best placed to do it. But you can decide when the best delivery or best submission date for that will be for your students. I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Janet. That brings us on to time. So I'll move us on for a little comfort break and see everyone back here at 2 o'clock to hear more from Janet about the occupational specialisms. Thanks very much, Janet, again, and see you in a bit.
My pleasure. Okay, look forward to being here soon. See you soon. Thank you.